Hello! Welcome to the Authentic Role-Playing Podcast, featuring independent DMs and GMs of tabletop role-playing games. My name is Alexis, Smolensk, and I'm coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, in Western Canada. Today, I'm talking to Erich Schmidt, who is living in Salem, Oregon, and the author of the game adventures A Ticket to Midnight and 3 Coins in a Well. Hello, Erich. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Oh, that's good. Erich, you tell me you've been gaming since 1980?
Yes, ever since I found the Blue Box Holmes edition at a comic book convention.
Do you feel that the amount of time played is necessarily evidence for being a good DM?
No, it's not. Practice does make perfect, but there have been a number of people that I've gamed with that have picked up very quickly various skills that enable you to run a good game. And I think it's, there's an aspect of talent to it.
But a person could easily play that long and still not have it together?
Yes, I think so.
Do you think you're much different from other DMs?
No, I don't. People have told me that they really enjoy the game that I run, and that sometimes they enjoy it more than other games they've been in. But I don't. In some cases, I don't really know why I've gotten that feedback as well. There have been many times that I've run an absolutely boring game. And, there have been other times when it's been, I've really been able to hit it out of the park. Well, we've been able to hit it out of the park. Me and the players.
I've heard that before. I've heard DMs say that before, that they're not sure why their players think they run a good game. Do you think that's universal?
I think so. There are aspects that you can point to, and that there have been times when, after a game, people have said, Erich, I really like this, but this other thing you really shouldn't do. I've tried to take that to heart and learn from that. So I think that there are a number of aspects that I can point to where I could say, I've learned this other thing might seem like a good idea, but it's really never worked for me. Methods of giving a description, methods of communicating how the player characters are affected in different scenarios, methods of handling cranky players, almost management techniques, if you will, that you pick up as time goes on.
How do you think you've picked them up?
I would say half of it from trial and error, and the other half adapting it from other experiences in my life. For example, there was a time when I had a job when I had to engage in small talk with customers. And that became an important aspect of the job, and that was a skill that I did not have. And being able to learn how to do that, to read the other person to find some topic that we could chat about for a little bit while I was getting things ready for them. I think that is a skill that has helped me interact with the player when I know that they're interested in pursuing something, and I can expand on whatever topic or adventure that they're interested in.
Do you think that your players embrace the rules of your campaign?
Some do, some don't. It is astounding to me how I can have a game with an otherwise intelligent person who's been in a difficult profession for several years, and I have to continually explain what 3 numbers to add to a D20 when they're making an attack. And other people who, when I give them the rule book and maybe a few sheets of house rules, how they just suck all of the data and all the implications and consequences from that data out of that text and come up with surprises for me. I think that it may be an aspect of perhaps engagement or, willingness to learn something new. I was going to say learning style, but depending on how charitable I'm feeling at the time. And I think part of the thing that surprises me about it is when a particular player seems otherwise engaged. They're interested in pursuing their agenda. They're interested in team working with the rest of the players to figure out how they can use their skills and abilities to reach a goal. But the foundational mechanics are just beyond them.
Okay, so how do you deal with the frustration? Do you just wallow through it, or how would you describe your feelings when you know you're faced with this?
Frustration's good. And I do my best to set it aside and then rant about it to my wife after everyone leaves. Why did I have to explain how to use this ability that the player likes over and over again? And I have to say that, obviously I'm thinking of, one or two particular people and that they've been able to learn over time. But the learning curve that has been displayed at times is very surprising.
So you don't show your frustration?
I try not to. I try to be patiently explaining things.
Oh, I don't mean that as a challenge, but sometimes it might be good to show your frustration.
Yes. They are able to pick up that I'm frustrated. And again, I think that's because I don't do this every session. But after, pulling a number out of the air, every third session, let's say, I try to talk with the players and say, are things making sense? Do you know how to use your character's abilities? Are you aware of how to improvise with them? Do you have any questions about this? Do I need to explain anything to you? I would say that I try not to express my frustration during the game, but I express it afterward so that I try to help them be able to engage with the rule set.
Have you had some successes?
I have. It has taken some patience, and there have been other players who have tried to assist because we all enjoyed each other's company, so we were willing to put forth the effort to help this person along.
Well, as the listener is putting their hands up in the air and saying, what successes? Can you point to something?
Oh, well, being able to make the decisions and do the simple math when you make an attack. Another success is being able to choose the spells for the spellcaster. When you have a choice of 3 things out of 7, that's a fairly simple task. When you have a choice of 10 things out of 40, that can get overwhelming. Having one person play a spellcaster from the very beginning, those skills of understanding the mechanics of playing a spellcaster, how to choose the spells, in what situations spells are important. I will try to make this war story really brief.
Sure.
So they were exploring a cavern. They were being assaulted by dark creepers, so little halfling-sized creatures that live in shadow and sneak incredibly well. This one person who was playing a druid realized she had a spell called Starshine, cast it, illuminated pretty much all the caverns and, as an aspect of the spell, revealed where all of these creatures were. And she was able to put together the synthesis of, here's a spell that does one thing. As a side note, it reveals hidden things. It has a huge area. Hey, this is the right place and situation for this spell. When she did that, then there was cheers all around the table. And she was really surprised. What? That was good, right? Yes, that was good.
So if you put the players aside, where are your frustrations with yourself?
My frustrations, engagement, creativity. You know, there's an old game called Shadowrun that I don't play anymore because one day I realized that I had nothing new to say with it, so I stopped running it. And engagement, when people pull out their cell phones, that drives me nuts. Now, I recently discovered, however, that I have one player who's rather boisterous and loud. And a second player was pulling out their cell phone relatively often. And it wasn't that the second player was disengaged with the game, or bored with the game. It was a way to screen out the boisterousness of the other player. So it was actually a way for them to maintain engagement in the game itself. And that also let me try to be a little corrective to the first player. I'm glad you're involved. I'm glad you're excited, but you gotta tone it down a little bit.
All right, but we're still talking about your players.
Yes, we are.
So you neatly turn the conversation away from yourself.
Job skill.
But I'm gonna push you. We've all had issues. We've all had days. We've all had bad days. And bad days come and go. But there's always things that we're talking to ourselves about when we're not playing. So what are some of those things for you?
Well, let me go back to the engagement. How do I keep players engaged? How do I get them invested? Get to that point. This is going to sound like I'm talking about the players again.
No. But rather than thinking about the solution to that, I'm more interested in the actual problem. Why do you think the players aren't engaged?
I think that the players aren't engaged when I hear things like, we've got to get rid of Duke Bothersome. What can Eric put against us? And I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, what resources does Duke Bothersome have? Because I want them to be so engaged they don't think of me as an adversary. Because I don't think of myself as an adversary. I think of myself as a director. You know, I'm setting up a scenario, setting up a world, and I want them to explore it. And even though I can literally do what I want, I've set up rules that govern my behavior.
Well, how about as an enabler?
An enabler? For what? Enabling poor actions amongst my players?
Yeah.
Yeah. There have times when I've done that, and that has been a problem.
Tell me how.
How it's been a problem?
Yeah.
Well, that one example where we had a guy who was really boisterous. He was loud. As night went on, he got more obnoxious. And he was great fun to be with at the beginning of the night. Less so as time went on. It was very difficult to find the balance between having him there and put energy into the group and having him be obnoxious and irritating everybody.
Yeah.
And, I never really found a good solution to that.
So you've been playing for a long time. I have to ask, how long has the issue of getting the party immersed in the campaign been an issue for you? Surely at some point you were young and you didn't think about such things.
Right. Well, I guess there are two answers to that. Either it's always been a problem, it still is a problem. I started recognizing the benefits of the engagement and the immersion, probably 2 or 3 years into it.
Yeah.
And I think, actually, I recognized it when I played in someone else's game, when I was looking at it from a different point of view.
I was going to ask if there were any mentors that you could point to about gaming.
No, not really. Now, I had a good friend when we found Dungeons & Dragons, and we kind of taught each other how to run the game. And that was great because we fed off of each other. And I think that we had 4 to 6 people who trusted each other enough where we could say, Eric, this description of the bas relief on the temple walls is awesome, but there's a Balrog in the center, and that would dominate our attention. And going, I really can't argue with that. That's a very good point. And then, different through, with each game, each month, as more time went, as we were in other people's games, we saw different styles, different techniques, and as we played and ran more games, we got better at it.
Yeah. Now, you said you wanted to talk a bit about structuring your campaign. So, changing the subject, how is your campaign structured just now?
Right now, I have pretty much a lot of lists, a couple spreadsheets. I have a pad of paper where I make my doodles and imaginings, and then as I file them, for lack of a better word, into Word and Excel, here's what's in this kingdom, here are the top 5 threats, here's an incredibly vague timeline of what might happen in the future of the campaign, both near and far, and lists of locales that, like the main cities that the players will adventure to, and the interactions between them. So to better answer your question, I structure things as locales, a few timelines, and the powerful.
About how long do you spend preparing for a given game session, a typical one?
About an hour.
Not very long.
No. I spend about an hour with the details. The trap that does this much damage. The monsters have these many hit points, things like that. I spend an undefined amount of time whenever I'm daydreaming. What would be cool here? What should be there? What are the consequences of the player's actions last week? A good part of that hour is formalizing that and then crunching numbers.
There's an old quote from a professional writer when he explains that he can't convince his wife that when he's standing there staring out the window, he is working.
Yeah.
So an undefined,
I appreciate that.
an undefined amount of time. Just thinking. I understand that perfectly. You're winging most of your game.
No. I am winging the parts that I didn't expect.
Okay.
So let's say I'm winging about half of my game.
You come to a room, and you know what the room is ahead of time. But have you written down a description of the room, or is that the part that you're winging?
We could say that is part of what I'm winging. I've probably written down a couple keywords maybe a word that reminds me of the architecture, another word maybe of the condition of the room, a little bit about the contents so that, they see what they see, whether or not they hear the drip of water, things like that.
And you're using your skills to fill in the gaps and the details, so the gears are there. You're just covering them with a little bit of cloth.
Yes, that's fair.
Do you find yourself scrambling very little or more often than you'd like?
I'd say I find myself scrambling fairly little. There was one time when my players decided that they were just done with these bad guys over here. They unrolled the map and said, "Has anyone been over here?" "No?" "Eric, that's where we're going." I'm like, "Oh, all right, rock on."
That happens to everybody.
Things like that aside, I feel that I have sufficient knowledge of the background of my world where, as long as they don't need too many formal names, I'm pretty good. And I've learned the benefit of having a couple sheets of paper with a few formal names of different cultures already ready to roll.
So unlike a lot of DMs, you don't really need more time to prepare.
Well, I would say I don't have a lot of time to prepare because I've spent a lot of time preparing.
Yeah.
I think one of I have pretty much one campaign world and a whole bunch of notes and files about it. And over time, that lends itself a certain complexity. I have thought that there is a certain aspect of leadership in DMing because you are trying to gather and hold the attention of 3 to 6 or however many people, which can be difficult. Now, you're not leading them to a particular thing other than having them make up their mind what they want to do, encouraging them to go forth into the world and have whatever adventure they want. So I guess it would be a bit of a steering.
I think that there's something worth investigating there. When you have a patient and they're talking to you about some situation that they're in, and you're communicating with that patient, you want the patient to be engaged in what you're saying.
Well, with the players, I suppose you could also say that they're invested in having a good time. They're invested in having a good time with their friends. And part of my job as the DM is to provide not the good time, but the framework for it. And finding out what they're interested in doing, what they enjoy, and then giving them what they want in a form that they can earn that result. I mean, you can't just give them what they want.
Yes, but aren't they looking for a solution as well?
They are. They are. Usually a solution to, they're looking to achieve a goal.
Yeah. And isn't that solution sometimes life-threatening?
Yes, it is. So they have to figure out how far they're willing to push their luck, how much risk they're willing to embrace, what constraints they may have. They may really decide to take 2 weeks to travel to the Fearsome Tower, but if they have some time constraint, they may have to take a more dangerous path. Or they may decide to take a more dangerous path because whatever is in the dark forest has a lot of loot.
Yeah. I'm interested, perhaps they're not scared enough.
Well, that happens when they get about halfway through the dark forest and have to retreat. Or they realize what they've gotten into.
Fair enough. So did you start off as a player?
No, I looked through the box, sat around with my 2-3 friends at the time, and said, okay, let's run a game. And I started off running. I enjoy playing, but I am driven to run a game.
So you've been doing it pretty much from the beginning?
Yes, it's always been something I've been interested in doing.
Have you taught anyone else how to play? You collaborated with your friend, but have you been a mentor?
Yes, I have. I was involved in a group of homeschoolers, and I helped design a relatively simplified game where the kids played the game during class time, and then they wrote about their experiences. And their experience points, if you will, was tied to how much they wrote. And I helped teach a couple different people what it meant to run a game, what it meant to guide or steer them without controlling them. And there have been, I think, one other person who expressed an interest in playing D&D, and I helped set them up. I found a couple good, what I consider starter modules, and had him read through those, and then we came back and I said, okay, how would you set this up? How would you introduce the game to the players? How would you explain how things happen? And we had, about a good hour and a half of chat about it.
And it was positive.
And it was positive. You know, there were aspects of his first few games that were rocky, but he and his friends were figuring out how to play, and they were having a good time.
Well, part of my premise for the podcast is to talk about how we teach people, how we would teach people how to DM. If I didn't know how to DM, how would you go about teaching me how to DM? I'd like to DM. I don't know how. How would you get me started?
I would give you a sheet of paper and a pencil. I say, draw a map. And you would draw a map, and I would go, okay, these 4 places, what's here? And I would have you explain what was there. Why would someone want to go there? What rumors might there be? What legends that would cause someone to risk their neck to go to that place?
So you'd begin with teaching people how to do the setting, and how to start thinking about the setting as a real place. So you're teaching the same skills that you teach when you're telling somebody how to write.
Okay.
When you talk about writing, you usually begin people on a setting build.
Okay.
You know, here's your setting. Now put people in it and have the people talk to each other about something that you know they with, and then go from there. And most people can take that leap. I mean, it doesn't say they're going to be good writers right off. I mean, most people can take that leap and go, well, I'd like it to be a science fiction thing, or I'd like it to be a history thing, or I'd like it to be a mystery thing or something. So they can start to fill in some of the gaps from other movies and stuff that they've read. So if I've played the game before and you start me off building a setting, I have at least some idea of playing the game that I can start to fill in the other gaps of the setting. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we talk too much about solutions and not enough about problems. We don't investigate why we feel uncomfortable when we're running the players, or why we feel that we're having a bad day or, you know, a bad session. Because you point to it, you say, yes, I've had bad sessions, but people don't really talk very much about what that was. For one thing, it makes you very uncomfortable to talk about it. I mean, you know, when I'm in a bad session, I feel logy. I don't have a lot of energy. I find it very difficult to get myself motivated to get excited about anything. So I'm not really communicating a great deal. And I'm usually in a place where I'm trying to get up and walk around and saying to people, and see, now already I'm talking about solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did I get there in the first place? We don't really talk about that.
Yeah.
Is there a problem in that you can think of that you haven't heard very much deconstruction about? Like that we don't really look at the problem, we just jump right to the solution.
I think a significant problem is giving yourself permission to make changes to stock material.
Stock material.
Yeah, so a lot of people buy modules.
Yeah.
They buy adventures and they run them, and lots of people have a great time with them, and some people find them dissatisfying, or they find something, and there might be something about it that they really enjoy, that really resonates with them, but when they run the adventure and they go through that first third, they find themselves just trying to plow through it to get to the good part that they really liked in the story. I think another problem is reading the players and figuring out, when Steve is just not interested, why is Steve not interested? I mean, does he want to be somewhere else? Is he bored with the game? Is he just hungry? And figuring out what's going up. Why aren't we gelling?
I think a lot of those sorts of things. I'm certain that when I was younger, I thought it was all me.
Mm-hmm.
That I was certain I was the cause, I was the fault, I wasn't a good DM, had to be me. If they weren't, whatever. And I think that at the same time, there's a part of everybody, me included, that goes, it's because they're not bought in. They haven't bought in. They're not giving their all. They're failing. They're not doing good enough. I can't run if I don't have good players. All that kind of thing. And now I'm ready to throw both of those out because I don't think either one of those are true. I think this is a hard game. I think it's a very, very difficult game. And I think we hold ourselves to too high a standard about what we expect ourselves to be able to do with material which is all invented on this, sometimes on the spur of the moment and sometimes ahead of time. But it's all invented. And most of it right out of our own heads. Even if we're running the module, most of it is still out of our own heads.
Right.
Even if you're running a module, you still have to control the people who are sitting at the table with you. So no module can tell you how to do that. And we go, I didn't do this spectacularly. Jim was bored. Jamie wasn't really having a good time. She never seems to be having a good time. It all has to be me because this is all on my shoulders. And I really think that that's bad thinking. I think we go to negative places that way, and we should be looking at this is hard. This is a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, if you look at the AD&D first edition books, there's a lot of data in those 3 books. And regardless of whether or not you think there are intrinsic flaws in the game or not, or prefer a different system, if you're trying to run that system, there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of dials and switches.
Yeah.
There are a number of things where they say, this is what we used. You don't have to, or, we didn't bother with those tables, but you might think they're cool. And, there's a lot of things that could happen and a lot of things to take into account.
So if we slice into the woods on the ball, then we should get off our own backs.
Yes, exactly.
You're going to slice. That's going to happen.
I think that, in the case of, say, a game that has levels like D&D, that does give you, playing at low levels and building up, does give the new people an opportunity to, while not use training wheels, but have them have the opportunity to learn the game at a simpler state. And then as time goes on and levels increase, you add more and more.
Yeah. Well,
wheels and widgets.
I am a strong advocate of that policy. I certainly run a much more complicated game than I ran when I was starting. But I remember when I was starting, I wanted to run the game I'm running now. I just wasn't able to.
To a certain extent, it's going to take time. You need to practice. You need to fail. You need to have some bad games so that you can sit back and think, why did things go wrong? Some people can be a great DM after, let's say, a couple years. Some people need more time, more practice. Just through some people maybe having an intuitive feel for the social aspects of the game and not only the mechanical aspects. Because I think that's the real part of the game that a DM needs to have talented skill with, marrying the social and mechanical aspects of the game.
Yeah, it's not just one or the other. I'm sometimes accused of being all mechanical because when I talk about it on the web, it's the mechanical that's easier to explain. It's more difficult to give examples of my emotional capacity as a DM in a blog post.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And being able to make someone feel is what makes the players really remember and get excited about the game in the future, I think.
Oh, I agree. Well, thank you. This is a good conversation. I really enjoyed this. Anyway, my guest has been Erich Schmidt. I'm Alexis Smolensk, and you've been listening to the Authentic Role-Playing Podcast. Please use the subscriber button and subscribe. If you're looking for more advanced content about Dungeons & Dragons and how to run the game, visit my blog at Tao of D&D, or buy my books How to Run, an advanced guide on managing role-playing games, or The Dungeon's Front Door. Both are available on Amazon, iBooks, and Lulu. You can also visit my other blog, Tao's Masterclass, for point-by-point recommendations on how to be a better Dungeon Master. You can find links for all of this content in the description below. I do wish you the best for your campaign, and I urge you to keep listening and keep reading, working on your world, and making D&D a better game every day.